Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Now, historic films made in the spring of 1948 and just released show Eniwetok preparing for heavily guarded and still largely secret tests of new atomic weapons. The test's purpose is to measure atomic effects on thousands of different materials, 30,000 tons of them, not, as at Bikini, to prove military effectiveness.
San Francisco police say that 9 persons have been arrested in a narcotics raid on the headquarters of the Grateful Dead, a widely popular singing group. 2 members of the group, Rod McKernan and Robert Weir, and their business manager, Danny Rifkin, have been booked on suspicion of possessing narcotics.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
Here we got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, strange lights are causing a viral buzz on YouTube. Could we have caught extraterrestrial activity on a recent newscast? Brandon Arroyo investigates.
As the newscast ended, the controversy began back on September 26th. What is that light shining in the back of the dark night sky?
With coverage reaching all the way back to 1948, for over 70 years, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Now, Fate Magazine Radio is carrying on that tradition of setting the standard in paranormal talk radio as we report and discuss some of the most mysterious and perplexing phenomena imaginable in this strange world of ours. Now, here is your host of Fate Magazine Radio, Kat Hobson.
Good evening. Welcome to Fate Magazine Radio. I am Kat Hobson, your voice of fate, as it were. I am coming to you live from the Old Paulding Jail in Paulding, Ohio. I have been up here for a few days for a private event. There is activity here. This is an active investigation paranormal research center. So there are resident spirits and they do interact. If that happens, we just roll with it because you know what? That is live radio, folks. I am really excited about tonight's show. I have got so many good times coming, good questions, good answers. And my guest is Peter Panagore. And I'm enthralled by his experiences. He has written the book, Heaven is Beautiful, How Dying Taught Me That Death Was Just the Beginning. I have, as y'all know, been very fortunate to speak with several, air quotes, experts on that because I know that we're always learning, but there are people that I do consider experts. One is Raymond Moody. He coined the term near-death experiences and wrote Life After Death. And the others are people that have also had these experiences. Peter is different. Peter is a minister he was ordained through the, oh my goodness, I have just lost the United Church of Christ. He is, oh, thank you. He was giving me crib notes. But we are going to be talking about a lot of things. And I will just tell you that Peter was ice climbing on the lower Weeping Well along the Icefields Parkway in Alberta, Canada. And on the descent, things went awry and he died. So we are going to be speaking with him about that experience, about the term near-death experiences, about faith, and about what he experienced in death. So, lower Weeping Well. Okay. I probably said Weeping Wall. My bad. But, Peter, I am so very pleased that you are here. I am looking forward to this conversation. You have got so much information. And welcome to Fate Mag.
Hey, Kate. Thanks for having me. I am excited to be here. I'm really glad to hear your voice, and I think we're going to have fun and have a good time.
I think we are too, because, I find your experience to be just enthralling. And it happened when you were young. So you are sharing this after having time to reflect on it. And that always helps, I think, to give a healthy perspective, don't you?
I do, Kat, and thanks for the correction in the crib note over there, too.
We'll just help each other all show. I love it.
I love it.
But, back to the length of time from your actual experience to your writing this book and sharing with all of us about what death was like. You died from exposure and you froze to death, correct?
I did.
What was that like? Do you mind sharing?
I don't. I've in the subsequent years, even rather recently, I finally have dealt with a lot of my trauma from that night, and so it's easier for me to talk about it.
Okay, good.
Dying from exposure was the actual dying process was rather peaceful, but everything before that actual dying process was terrifying. The night was very cold and very long. Situation deadly, and so we kept our cool, my climbing partner Tim and I, but it was
That's an odd play on words.
Well, words are my fun tools.
I can tell.
Words are fun for me, but it was I can only tell you how there was so much terror inside me, and the situation was so desperate that the only way to deal with it was to swallow my terror and keep my focus and take one step and the next move in order to not fall and in order to try to survive. So I kept swallowing my fear and kept swallowing it and forcing myself to be level-headed and forcing myself to pay attention and forcing myself to be exactly where I was in the moment I was there in order to pay attention what needed to be done in order to survive. But there was a lot of trauma that, well, it wasn't until 2016 when I went back to the wall again and called myself back to one person, I guess I could say. I called my soul back and was able to scream and shout. And at that moment in 2016, the doorway into my death became a doorway back to life again. But the lead up, then all the trauma that I experienced from 2016 on, it dissipated But until that time, every time I told my story, I cried. And I told it a lot, and I couldn't help my tears. They just would come on their own. It was just terrifying. But freezing to death, I'll give you some what it's like to actually freeze to death. It started with muscle tension. I was shivering, tension and relaxation. I was shivering so violently that my whole body shook and my jaw clattered. I lost, this is over many hours. I'm just giving you the highlights of step by step. I lost my coordination. I'm a very coordinated person. I lost my coordination. My face froze to the point where I couldn't speak. My lips weren't working. My brain was freezing and began to make poor decisions. Eventually, I got to the point where my feet were frozen like blocks of ice. I still have all my digits. I'll let everybody know I didn't lose any.
Oh, that's nice. That's unusual.
It is, but everything is damaged. I have the temperature. I live in the coast of Maine, and when the temperature gets below 55, when it hits especially 50, I have to wear gloves. I dress very warmly all the time. I have messed up my interior thermometer, but my feet were frozen blocks of ice. Then what happened next, this is at the very end, I got hot, which is not true, but your brain tells you that your body's hot. And I unzipped my coat, and a peace began to flow over me as I recognized that I was definitely not getting out of the situation. I accepted that I was going to die where I was. I began to think about my family and leaving them and knowing that I couldn't stop the process. Then eventually I began to fall asleep. And the last thing that happened to me was when I woke up from one of my freezing to death induced sleeps, during which I would collapse. I was clipped into the mountain at the time. I got tunnel vision, which is a strange sort of experience where I had a big black circle around my vision that was like a spotlight on a stage in reverse. And it, well, not in reverse, but the blackness came right down and focused in, and narrowing my vision till it went out, just gone.
Wow.
But it was peaceful at the end. So freezing to death, to answer your question, it hurts on the way, on the build up, but in the end, it's pretty quiet.
You know, I am glad that it is. I'm sorry for the terror when you have to recognize and cope with the fact that this is actually happening to you. I was just curious when you were talking about, the fading out and then coming back. Do you remember how many times that happened to you, and why do you believe that did? I mean, did you find an explanation for more than one time of leaving?
Well, I didn't actually leave my body more than once. I would fall asleep. And the reason why I would fall asleep, so standing, I should describe the scene for you. So it's probably, because I didn't have a watch on and I wasn't really paying attention to the time, but it might have been around 3 a.m. And the temperature was maybe 20 below, and we were about 150 feet up. On our descents, there was a ledge the size of a kitchen table, twice the size of a kitchen table, and in the rock, we were off the ice, we were on the rock, and in the rock were a couple of iron pins with rings and carabiners and permanently attached straps with carabiners on the end, so you could strap yourself to your harness. So we were secure. But the thing is that I would fall asleep and my body would collapse, and then I'd fall onto the rock and smack my head. And I had a helmet on, and when I smacked my head, I'd wake up and I would stand up again. And so I had this repeated process of falling asleep, but I don't really know how many times I fell asleep. I just know that it was more than once and maybe 3 times. I don't really know. And the last time this happened, my body collapsed. So when I fell asleep, the strange thing is that when I fell asleep, I lost consciousness. And this makes a difference. This is important to my story because
Yes.
when I was asleep, I had no consciousness at all. And smack, my head hits the rock. I wake up. I stand back up again. I pull on the rope, which is stuck. I can't get the rope free. That's what the problem is. I can't get the rope free. And I pull on the rope and I fall asleep and I smack my head and I stand back up. And then this time I stood back up again. Then I had tunnel vision, and I had never seen tunnel vision before. It was very odd experience, and I remember looking over to one side toward the rope, which is to my right, and then I looked over to my left, and I could see out across the Saskatchewan River was down below us, and there was a big, huge mountain across from us, all covered with ice, and beautiful stars above us, and I just watched this collapsing tunnel coming to darkness, and then I swung my face back toward the rock, and when I looked back toward the rock, the tunnel went dark, and I remember thinking, why am I still conscious? I'm in darkness, but I'm awake. And then I realized I didn't feel any pain anymore, and I thought to myself, why do I feel like I'm still aware? And as I stared out into this darkness, befuddled, the darkness became enormous. It suddenly became the size of the universe, only it was absolutely dark, but I could see in the far distance a pinprick of light. And it's how can you see distance and depth in darkness? I can't explain that to you, but I could see distance and depth in this pitch darkness. I could see in the dark. And way far in the distance, this pinprick of light appeared and rushed toward me. And I'll continue telling my story, Kat, but I want to leave it open for questions for you. So I'll stop right there if you want to have something you want to ask.
Well, I do. I think that it sounds like your body was just trying so hard to survive. But you said that you've kept having numbness, it sounds like, to a degree piece because you were kind of dangling there or collapsing. And when your tunnel vision started, you could still see the mountain, the stars and such. When did it actually start to narrow to the point? Was it just when you looked at the wall, or was it narrowing as you were experiencing it?
It was narrowing the whole time. The narrowing took about, and this is just a guess because I don't really know, maybe 10 seconds from wide, if you stick your arms out to your side and you put your fingers forward with your peripheral vision, you can see your fingertips. From that point, there was just a big black ring, and that collapsed rapidly. 10 seconds, 5 seconds, I don't really know. It collapsed very rapidly, and by the time I looked back toward the mountain again, as if I don't even know why. I think I turned my head right, and then I turned my head left, and then I was just looking forward again, trying to figure out what was going on. And it was then that it just collapsed to darkness. And this. If your listeners are interested, they could go to Wikipedia and look up hypothermia, death by hypothermia, and you'll see these steps right there.
Well, I did that, and I'm just interested because I had never thought that an actual death could be described so in depth. I'm fascinated by that, and I appreciate what you were going through. I have, as I said, I've spoken with people who experience similar things, but this is just so graphic and so, not in a negative way, just the explanation. And when you saw the light that was coming out of the darkness, you said it approached quickly. Did it cause you trepidation?
Not initially, and it was very distant from me. It was I don't know, a billion light years. I don't know, some extraordinary distance from me, and it approached me faster than the speed of light. And it happened so fast. I didn't know what I was looking at, and it filled my vision, and it communicated to me telepathically as it approached me really fast. I'm taking you. You're coming with me. non-linguistic, no words, direct communication. I'm taking you. And I resisted. I put up all of my willpower. I had spent my night driving myself forward. I felt like I dug down into the depth of my brain at the very earliest levels of evolution for just the one thing of survival. Survival. And I used that as my driving force to survive. So I drove myself forward with my willpower, tapping into this deep place. And so I had this reservoir, this access to a very powerful part of myself, and I put it up as a wall. I remember thinking, oh, no, you're not. And I dug all this willpower up, and I put it up like a shield, but it was a shield of paper, of rice paper. And it just, this entity reached through and pulled me out of myself. And just took me. And so in that instant of resistance before being taken, and as I was being taken, there was some trepidation, but instantaneously I was in comfort. I was in comfort. I was inside. I was enveloped inside this entity I call an angel, but that is metaphor. It's intelligence, it's power. It had so much power that I had no power in its presence. But I was in comfort. I was encased. I was carried and enveloped and lifted. And out I went. And at that moment, I was content. I was fine. All was well.
A lot is to be said for contentment, but we have to take a break. And this is so fascinating. I am very appreciative of you being here. For everyone listening, we will be right back after this station announcement. Y'all come back too.
Warning, the following message does not necessarily reflect the views of WBHM-DB or its hosts, guests, listeners, or of any functioning adult in general. In fact, Frank should probably seek professional help. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi there, Frank Lee here. I thought that I would spend a few moments telling you about the positivity from the network here. The overall message of para-unity and happiness, and how everyone here wants to get along with everyone out there, and how everything is just wonderful. Wait. Cat's not looking. Okay, I've got something to really tell you. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what's really going on. Honestly, all that being nice and positive crap was kind of hurting my soul, as dark as it is. So, what's really happening? Well, you see it all the time. Everybody and their brother out there has a paranormal team because they watch a couple of episodes of Ghost Hunters or some crap like that. So they go and they spend half their mortgage payment on tools and things that light up that they don't understand. And then the next logical step after buying matching black t-shirts and posing like 90s rappers for their Facebook page is to, of course, have their own podcast. Well, you know what? You're not going to find that crap here. What we have here at WBHM Digital Broadcasting is the best host, the best guest, bringing you real information. All of the hosts here on this network know their stuff. They are the people who have been out there doing the work, doing actual research. And no, by research, I don't mean binge watching some kind of cheesy TV show on Netflix. I mean reading books. I mean out in the field doing the legwork. And who are they interviewing on their shows? They're bringing you the people they have learned from. They're bringing you the best in the field, covering all kinds of topics, from UFOs and aliens to Bigfoot to cryptozoology to ghosts to anything you can think of, a bit strange and unexplained. It is here, and you're going to get the best information here. So stay tuned. to WBHM Digital Broadcasting. Don't go anywhere. Speaking of going somewhere, I've got to go before my mic gets cut. We'll see you there on WBHM-DB.
Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine. Thank you so much for being here. And we are live. I am absolutely having a great time with Peter Panagore. I am not sure that's actually the right phrase to use. I am having a fascinating time, Peter. I had told you that, I'm so interested in what you experienced. And I'm also interested in what comes next because I think that's just our human nature. We haven't done this. We don't know. And you have. So I think that's pretty cool.
Changed
and
my
I
life.
appreciate. Well, obviously. It took it from you and you got it back. That's
Sort of.
Yeah. Well, tell me about that.
Well, would you like me to tell you what happened?
I would.
So everything that I say from here on out is in metaphor because I went to a place of non-being where there were no things. Early on when I started thinking about it and started trying to understand what had happened to me, nothing was the word that nothing and fullness, nothing and everything were words that came to my mind, a place of paradox. So I was inside what I call my angel, this intelligence. Beyond intelligence doesn't even come close to describing how much knowledge and understanding and compassion and wisdom was inside this entity that was carrying me. And we rapidly ascended through the darkness up a tunnel. But the tunnel wasn't like a narrow tunnel. I could still see the expanse of the darkness, the void that I was in, but there was definitely a pointed trajectory along a certain line toward a destination. And we rose rapidly. I could see outside. I could see the entity was transparent, but it was like sitting inside of, it's like a cartoon. I'm sitting in a cloud. I'm sitting on this very comfortable kind of cloud thing, and I still had my astral self was still there. I still had a sort of a physical form to me. And then I passed through a barrier. It passed me through a barrier, or it became an infinity. It's hard to describe what exactly happened. But the next thing I knew, I had traveled an immense distance, as far away as I returned to where the light had come from. And when I passed through this barrier, I suddenly was 10,000 times larger, and I had no physical form anymore. I was what I described, this is all metaphor, as an orb of consciousness. I was an energy ball, but it wasn't like I had an energy ball and myself. I was the energy ball, and I was one huge eyeball or 10,000 eyeballs, or which was linked with my thinking, but I had no brain, and I could see in every direction at once simultaneously where I was in an infinite illuminated darkness, and I could see in every direction, and I was content. The first thing that I experienced was, this is me. It was as if I had taken off this false self and returned to my true self. And my true self was expanded and much larger than my physical body had ever been. I was thinking more rapidly than I'd ever thought before, and I was comfortable beyond explanation. And I was just floating in this infinite darkness, content and unafraid. And a doorway, a portal, a tear in the darkness, I don't know how to describe this other than a door, an opening. It was like a waterfall of light, a cascade that was enormous. I was the size of a human being in front of the Niagara Falls, 3 or 4 Niagara Falls together. It was an enormous flow right in what I'd say in front of me, but I had no front. I was
You were
looking in every
just
direction at once.
right.
But
That
there was
is,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
well, I'm sorry. I mean, was the being of you, I mean, were you aware of the awesomeness of what you were surrounded by? Were you moved by that, or was it just part of the experience?
It was comfort. I wasn't.
Well, you said comfort, but I
Yeah,
thought I
yeah,
was.
but when the doorway appeared, that's a different thing. But until the doorway appeared, I was just content. But when this portal, this gateway appeared, this waterfall of light that was pearlescent and
Mhm.
fluid, and I could see through it. It was transparent. It was translucent. I could see the depth of it, and I could
Right?
see the surface of it, and it was an attractant. It was like it
Oh,
was speaking to me, calling to me, desiring me, and I was fascinated by it, and I reached with myself to touch it. And when I touched its surface, I should say that when I saw through it, there was a further tunnel. There was a much longer tunnel leading ever deeper into the eternity. And I reached and I touched this. And when I touched it, I entered it, the flow. I entered inside the waterfall of light, and it filled me. It flowed into me and surrounded me. And I went into this state of bliss and paradise. But all these things happened at once. I need to say that I was in timelessness also. There was no future or past. All time was present and no time was present. And when this entered into me, I heard my name called, but not Peter, because that's just who I am now in this temporary life. It was the name
so
of
your
my
soul
soul,
name.
my soul name, the essence of my being. It was I saw in the calling of my name, and I heard and I experienced my own origin. I heard and understood creator and me as creature. I saw myself as I described myself as a photon, a superpositioned wave and particle photon that was a limited single photon, but I could see the divine light was a googolplex of photons as a mass of enormousness, of infinite enormousness, and I was light from light. I was a particle of light, the same as the divine super self, but I was somehow reduced from it. I was created by it. I was in the
Well,
presence of creator. And
I do have a question
sure.
because one of the things that was suggested that we discuss, and when we're going into the physics side of your experience of death, I mean, I'm to be a proton. It's just mind-boggling what you're describing, because you've got the singularity here of you as a self, and you're expanding to where you are a whole, and you have your creator who is interacting with you. That is kind of mind-boggling. It's not just kind of mind-boggling. It's fascinating. How you explain things is really resonating with me as you're describing this. I've never heard anyone else share an experience like this that was so intense. And the way that you have come through this and the things that your life have become since that, and the fact that you have begun sharing it and using through ministry and things of that nature. I'm trying to grasp it, and I'm sure other people listening may be too. Can you expound on the the actually being yourself. You know, it's you spoke of speaking through metaphors. Well, I knew before I learned of you that metaphor is the language of mystics. And, you know, you have a language that's unspeakable that is being shared with you. You say that Jesus was code switcher too. So, you know, can you expound on that just a little bit as we're moving through this whole experience that you're transitioning? I would take it to transition.
Are you meaning expand on the use of metaphor?
Well, expand on the use of metaphor in this particular instance. You know, you have a language. The soul name, obviously, is something that is very personal between creator and creation. Mm-hmm. But the other things are, you know, there's how do you understand that language because it's unspeakable? And how did you know that it was you?
Good questions. I understood the language because it was self-evidently so. I knew the language when it was spoken to me. There were no words in this language. There were it's not even like concepts. It's kind of underneath concepts. It's just truth. There was just truth communicated, and it was very direct. There was no, and I understood it. I had no brain in the way of my thinking. I understood it. I understood it with the whole of my being, and it was self-evidently so. Just true. And I recognized myself as this is who I am. This is who I have always been. And so this is my soul language. My soul knew the language, but my soul isn't something separate from me. My soul is me.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I need to step back a little bit first, Kat, though. And I'll talk about metaphor before I step back, but I need to talk about my hell experience first, and I need the audience to understand that all of this was in timelessness. So there's no real sequence of events that I can describe. It happened all at once, sort of. Mm-hmm. But let me talk about metaphor for a second. In metaphor, you're right. Few people know what you said. That metaphor is the language of mystics everywhere. It's Rumi, it's Lao Tzu, it's Hafez, it's Jesus, it's everybody. Everybody who's had a mystical experience of a higher order has to speak in metaphor because there is no language there. And so whenever the mystic comes back, Julian and Norwich, Meister Eckhart, they use the language of their context, of their education, of their culture, of their religion, of their poetic or non-poetic abilities to describe the indescribable. That's why Rumi's poetry is so beautiful.
Yes,
because he was a master of metaphor, and that's why people didn't understand Jesus, because he's talking in metaphor and nobody knew.
True.
So, but I want to step back and I want to talk about hell first, because the divine experience of seeing myself, I first had to be stripped away of the impediments that were in my way to see myself. So as all of this happened, I also went through a hell of my own making, is how I describe it. But it was a purgative fire of divine love. It was this cleansing that occurred where I became every single person who I had hurt in my life with intention and unintention. I became them inside of them and experienced the pain that I gave them in my life from the outside, and felt it as they felt it, and thought their thoughts, and saw through their eyes, and felt with their skin. I was inside in a sequence every single person that I hurt as I experienced the pain that Peter, me, had given them. And so as I was inside the sequence of people feeling all of their pain, I was simultaneously inside myself seeing all my justifications and reasons for causing them their pain, and I was my own judge. And the pain that I gave them turned out what?
Well, it sounds a lot like what others have termed a life review.
Oh, it's a life review.
That's what you would call that?
Yes.
Okay.
My life review involved judging myself in the presence of divine love, and seeing that all of my justifications and reasons for causing all the immense pain that I caused, and it was just your run-of-the-mill sibling stuff and friend stuff, but it turned out that the pain that I gave them was 10,000 times larger than I thought it was, and it attached to me. And so I suffered their pain that I gave them, juxtaposed to the rationalizations I had or emotions I had that caused me to cause their pain, in the divine presence of overwhelming and abundant love, and I judged myself as guilty. And the voice that has no sound was surrounding me and inside of me, saying, I love you, I made you, I know you, and showed me myself, showed me my soul, showed me my soul name, called me into being. And in this moment of being shown my true self, I turned toward the divine love. I accepted the presence of the divine love. And that's when all of this seeing myself as soul, photon, and the enormous eons long length of my existence and the other lives I had lived, all these things happened because I accepted the love that was offered to me. But it was also self-evident. I mean, I don't know how I could have turned down the love. It was so overwhelming. It was a flood of love that overcame all of the attachments I had. My life review seemed to have been about my attachments to pain that I gave away, and that was all
interesting.
Gone.
That's not what I anticipated a life review to be.
Well, that's mine. Other people have
I mean, but to me, it's fascinating because it stands to reason. You know, we're always taught, if you're in different, Christ-based religions that don't necessarily love like he does, that your judgment, as it were, is going to be based on every little nook and cranny thing that you did or thought or whatever.
That's what it was. Every nook and cranny.
But of the reactions that you caused in others, apparently the pain that you caused with your behaviors and such.
Yes.
That is.
And I knew that I was known, Kat. There was no corner of me that was unknown. There was no hiding. I was naked, seen, understood, known, always had been known. Never was not
loved.
known. Oh, and still loved. Loved as I was, for who I was, as I was, because I was a creature created by light and love. And at the core of my being, that's who I am. It's like a parent who loves a child no matter what happens. It was like that, only better. And in the midst of this, so in the midst of going through this hell in my life review, I also saw humanity's brokenness. I saw that it was not my fault that I caused pain. It's just being human, and that there was no greater or lesser in my experience of the pain that I gave away. It was all magnified 10,000 times. And when you get up to that scale, it's the same across the scale.
Yes.
And there was this, and I had this heaven's view. I could see that it was not my fault, even though I was guilty for the action. It was not my fault because I didn't make the algorithm that runs the universe. I'm just a
byproduct.
A byproduct, yes.
We have to get a break.
Okay.
We have to get a break, and I hate to stop you because, man, this is awesome. But we will be right back. Y'all come back too, and Peter's going to continue sharing with us. We'll be right back.
You're listening to WBHM, Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope.
That'll do. Hello, I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate magazine. I am Kat Hobson, your host. Thank you for being here. Tonight's show is just fantastic. My guest is exemplary. His experiences so far have just mesmerized me. I hope that you're enjoying this nearly as much as I am. We are going to be available in rebroadcast. You can download us. Instagram, yes, that's right. I figured that out. iHeartRadio, iTunes, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your subscriptions from, that's where you'll find us. Peter, thank you so much. I'm so sorry that I interrupted you. We just had to go and take care of that little bit of station announcement because they asked for that. And when we were talking during the break, which is my favorite time, I always say someday somebody's going to record those, but it's not going to be me. I mean, really, it's just part of the learning process. You know, I interrupted your train of thought. Would you please continue?
Yes, I was talking about judgment, I think. I think I was talking about divine love.
The love through the judgment. And
yes,
the whole, the point of the review is so that you can see what you had done.
But it also showed me that it was the nature of the universe to be limited, and I was in the presence of the unlimited. And because the universe and humanity is limited, we can't be pure. We can't be unlimited. And so for me to be in the presence of the fullness of the divine, I had to have the divine fire of love purge me of the attachments that prevented me from fully experiencing and being immersed in love. And so from my point of view, I could see that I describe it as when you're in a mountain range and you're at the bottom of the valley and you're looking up and you see the peaks. That's what it's like on Earth, where there are hills and valleys and mountains and of different heights, and people look at each other and they judge each other for what they do. Oh, you did this wrong thing. Oh, you did this bad thing. You're worse than I am. Oh, you're better than I am. But from where I was, there was none of that, because there was this great radical equality of the singularity of brokenness. And this single truth of everything that there is in a limited form in order to exist negates my it didn't take that wasn't what took away my brokenness. It just showed me, but that's just the way it is. It's just the way it is, not your fault. But I still went through all of the pain that I gave away, and it was still the overwhelming abundance of love that turned me to listen to the voice that was speaking inside me. And it was also so I not only brought all with me all of the pain I gave away in my life, I brought all of the love that had been given to me. All the love that people gave me and all the love I gave away in my life, it was the treasure that was inside of me. And it seemed like that was the ear through which I could hear the divine speaking to me. I love you. I made you. I've always known you. Nothing about you is hidden from me, and I love you as you are. And when I turned toward the love with my self, then I was instantly infilled. And all these things happened at once. I described seeing the photon of myself. I saw the length and the breadth and the width and the eons of my life as a soul since the moment of my creation. But my moment of creation it was both at the same time that I was there in timelessness. I was always being created. I was always in the process of being born, always. But I had also been born for a very long time, and I had lived all these other lives. And all the lives I had lived, they were nothing in comparison to the breadth and width and depth of my soul self. They were little tiny spots of existence in the divineness of my eternal self. And
so, I'm sorry.
That's right.
As you describe that, from the point of your soul's creation, has that been infinity that you've existed?
No, I couldn't see into infinity. I could see that infinity existed, but I couldn't see into the very center of the self of the divine, to the infinity itself, to the origin, to its center point. As a creature, I was created. As soul is a creature, I was created. But I was also made of the same substance of the divine. So I was also eternal. But as a consciousness, as a soul, as I could see myself as an existent, I was limited. I had limitation. I was not the fullness of the divine self, even though I was made of the same substance. And this being born as a soul is both eternal in length or eons in length, but it's also constantly present at the very moment, always being called into being. I'm always being, right now, as I'm talking to you, Kat, this divine, I have never not heard the divine calling me into being. Always, I hear this inside myself, always going on. And
can you describe that a little more in depth? I mean, if you're constantly being called into being, then as we live the existence that we're in now, how is that relevant to what we experience as soul beings in the lifetime that we're within?
It's this paradox of continual creation. It's that there's it's so hard to talk about. As I live it in my life, I have the fullness of my higher self inside my body, but most of me didn't come back. Most of me still is existent on the other side. It's like I don't know how to describe it. I can describe it as rabbis talk about it, that the soul is the size of the body. No, pardon me. The soul is the size of the suit, but the
Right.
shoe thinks that the foot is the totality. It's still a part of the body. The fullness of myself is existing in the divine self always, and the part of me that's in my physical body is it's part of the whole, but it's also reduced and small. It's the size of a foot in a shoe, and it's always this constant.
That's a good explanation. That's excellent.
Thanks. It's a rabbinic description.
It's people who do not study metaphysics tend to be overwhelmed when people are talking of things of this nature. And it's important, I think, to get it down to a plane where someone listening who is interested, or curious about your experience, but doesn't know a lot about metaphysical living, if that's the right term, can understand, can grasp. Because if you start, as you felt when you were feeling this, and as I feel through meditation and other techniques, it can be overwhelming, even if you're aware of that interaction. Everybody is, but there are different names for it, and not everyone is fully grasping what is being offered or given them. So that's why I had that question.
It's a good question. I've spent my entire life, since the day that I came back, learning to negotiate living in the world as an alien, and trying to language for myself what happened to me so that I can understand it and my brain can understand it in some way, and to then communicate it, because that's what I do for a living for 40 years, is try to do exactly what you said. Try to make it accessible. I'm trying to make it accessible. And I appreciate your question, because you help your audience by reminding me to do so.
Well, your experience is so big. What you learned, what you brought back, the part of you that you left to come back. It's a huge deal, a lot of a big experience, and not everybody has that. I had to fumble around a little bit to be able to grasp it myself. And it's just so beautiful. People need to understand that this is something that is capable. What you experienced with the divine is a natural thing. It's the creator loving the creation
into being, loving creation into being.
Yes.
That's the biggest takeaway that not the biggest, but a big takeaway that I have, is that everything is made of love, even suffering. All of it, everything underneath it is the divine self. And if you can tap into this in some way, if it's loving your children or loving your spouse or your lover or your dog or your cat or loving being in nature, it's all connected to the divine. Even in the middle of suffering, even suffering is connected to the divine. And I know that's hard, but even suffering is an opening. It can open us to the divine presence. Happens all the time.
Yes. It does. And it's a blessing that you get to experience that and recognize it as such. If you're on a mountaintop, if you see an aspen tree and you're not from their region, they are just a divine creation themselves. The colors and the form, as well as everything that we're gifted with. But I digress.
Oh, no, that's right on target, because I was going to add and say that if you are present to the life force energy in the aspen tree, it feeds you.
It does.
The divine force will feed you.
And
that's how I survive here. That's how I've survived for 40 years.
Yes. Well, the interaction is such a blessing. And, you know, the Aspen came because a friend of mine who lives out in Colorado sent me pictures last week. And I didn't realize that he's a psychic and he's very gifted and he is a very unusual psychic. But he was preparing me for the show. So thank you very much, Joel.
What do you know?
I love my friends. But anyway, I do. It's just so important that people know that, if you look into a child's eyes and you see that sparkle, or if you look into your spouse's eyes and you see that love, and sometimes not so much. there are that's part of it too. But it's just part of the human side of the experience, which we were created to be living right now. It's just, sometimes I wonder what on earth my soul was thinking. But I'm so glad it did.
Well, you'll find out.
I will find out.
Yep. That's
so
the way it works.
When you go back to, we've got to go to our top of the hour break. I just looked at the clock. This is our news break. And I'm always hopeful that we're going to get good news. I'm not giving that up. I don't care what anybody tells me. I'm not being a Pollyanna. There is good in the world. So we're just going to look for it for a little while. We'll be back after this news break. Y'all come back too.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Kroger, who puts a lot of care into ensuring their produce is fresher than fresh, like grading and testing lettuce on 24 different levels. Shop fresh at your local Kroger today. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Live from NPR News, I'm Janine Herbst. A U.S. Navy nuclear engineer and his wife were arrested Saturday on espionage charges after attempting to sell secrets about submarines to a foreign entity. This according to court records unsealed today. NPR's Dave Mistich has more.
The Department of Justice says 42-year-old Jonathan Toebi passed on restricted information to an FBI agent posing as a representative of a foreign government. According to the criminal complaint, Toebi came to the attention of authorities in December of last year. After the FBI had obtained a package, it says, Toebi sent expressing a desire to sell the information to a foreign government. The DOJ says after a series of encrypted communications, Toebi later conducted dead drops of restricted information. Authorities say Toebi's wife, Diana, served as a lookout. In all, the DOJ says Toebi conducted 3 of these dead drops before being arrested Saturday in West Virginia. He and his wife are scheduled to make an appearance in federal court Tuesday. Dave Mistich, NPR News.
Alabama Governor Kay Ivey is extending a state of emergency order designed to help hospitals swamped with COVID-19 patients. Pat Duggins of Alabama Public Radio has more.
Alabama hospitals are still struggling to maintain enough staff to handle its COVID-19 caseload despite dropping below 1,000 patients. That's the first time the state's coronavirus burden has been that low since July. Governor Kay Ivey's order to extend a state of emergency until the end of the month is meant to ease regulations allowing out-of-state doctors, nurses, and pharmacists to work in Alabama hospitals. The state's health department recently said Alabama had more COVID deaths than live births. Most of the people occupying hospital beds are unvaccinated. For NPR News, I'm Pat Duggins in Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Cruise ships are returning to San Francisco harbors for the first time in 18 months. Natalia Navarro with member station KQED reports the city's cruise terminals are now open after a hiatus due to COVID-19 health mandates.
Officials say cruises bring in thousands of passengers and crew to waterfront small businesses, along with millions of dollars. But things came to a halt in March 2020 after the Grand Princess ship spent nearly 3 weeks quarantined in the bay. 103 people on board tested positive for COVID and 3 people died. The CDC is requiring that passengers and crew members be vaccinated. Andre Coleman with the Port of San Francisco says things are looking promising.
We're looking forward to the 21 ships that are scheduled to call this year, but even more excited to have a record year next year as we're scheduled to receive 127 vessels in the year 2022.
That's about 50% more scheduled stops than pre-pandemic averages. For NPR News, I'm Natalia Navarro in San Francisco.
Asia markets are trading lower at this hour. The Asia Dow is down nearly 1%. You're listening to NPR News. A.Q. Khan, regarded as the father of Pakistan's nuclear weapons program, has died. He's hailed as a hero at home, but as NPR's John Ruwitch reports, abroad, he's infamous for having helped Iran and North Korea with their nuclear programs.
Khan was a metallurgist by training. He worked in Europe for a spell, then joined Pakistan's secret nuclear program in the 1970s. He later would run it, leading to the country's first nuclear test in 1998. In 2004, with help from Western intelligence agencies, Pakistan arrested Khan for illegal proliferation. He was held under house arrest for the next 5 years and lived out the remainder of his life quietly. Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan tweeted that the late scientist was a national icon loved by the nation for helping protect it against India. Thousands attended Khan's funeral in Islamabad. He was 85. John Ruwitch, NPR News, Islamabad.
A strong earthquake struck off the coast of Hawaii today. The U.S. Geological Survey says the quake had a magnitude of 6.2 and struck about 17 miles south of Nalehu. The quake rattled residents and sent items flying off the shelves, but there were no reports of injuries or major damage. Tropical storm Pamela has formed off Mexico's Pacific coast and is expected to strengthen to hurricane status before hitting shore somewhere near the port of Mazatlan at midweek. The National Hurricane Center says Pamela is expected to take a turn toward the north, brushing close to the tip of the Baja Peninsula midweek at hurricane strength. The storm right now has maximum sustained winds of 45 miles an hour. The center is about 530 miles south of Mazatlan. I'm Janine Herbst, NPR News.
Hey, my name is Peter Sagal, and I'm here to help you with the most pressing problem facing civilization today. There are too many good podcasts to listen to. Now, why not avoid that whole problem by listening to an extremely silly podcast hosted by me? On Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, it's wisecracks about the week's news, shenanigans, fart jokes, and general silliness. And doesn't that sound pretty great right now? Listen to the Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me podcast from NPR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Fate Magazine Radio here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I am Kat Hobson, your host, the voice of Fate, as I have been dubbed by a couple of people. I like it. I'll take it. And tonight's show is brilliant. But before we get back, I do want to let you know that our new edition is out. And if you would check fatemag.com, that is where you will find information on back editions, new editions, updating your subscription if something has happened and it lapsed. Go get that taken care of so you can get our new ones too. We have got T-shirts, we have got trading cards, we have uncirculated archives. If you have a collection you're trying to balance out, and there's all kinds of stuff. It's just a great thing. fatemag.com is the place to go and enjoy it. It's a great site, and we have the best editor going with Phyllis. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Welcome back to my guest, Peter. And Peter Panagore is someone who experienced death, and he asked to come back, and we're going to talk about that. Peter, I am having such a great time with our discussion, and thank you for being here.
You're welcome, Kat, and you're asking great questions.
Well, I have lots of them. This is a topic that not everybody actually gets a chance to talk to someone who has lived it or died it.
Yeah, I was just thinking that's a funny expression, but it's right? Totally true. Yeah,
or died it.
Yeah.
That, it's something that you and I spoke about the experience that you went through in the downtime, in the break times. And you said that you consider the term near-death experience to be inaccurate.
I do.
And you wanted to talk about that a bit. And I agree. with you, although someone I like a lot did coin the phrase.
Me too.
But it is not an accurate statement, I don't think. And we both agreed on the why. Can you share that?
Sure. 1986, I died in 1981. Between 81 and 86, I had no name for what happened to me. I couldn't even talk to anybody about it. It was hard enough to even think about trying to formulate language to understand it for myself. And then somebody handed me a blessed Raymond Moody's book, The Life After Life. I think that's the name of it.
It is, because I had it wrong. I said life after death, but it is life after life.
And Dr. Raymond Moody, he coined the phrase, and of all the work that Dr. Moody has done, I give him 100% and triple A's for what he's done with his life.
Yes.
In order for making this possible for conversation, but also for me personally, for helping me understand what happened to me. Oh my gosh, there are other people like me, but the term near-death experience never has described what happened to me. I've been near death before. Okay, I've been shot at. I nearly got knocked off a climb by a huge boulder. I got laid on by a grizzly bear. I've been held at gunpoint. All these, they were all kind of near death. One step in the other direction. Been in car wrecks, but that's very different from actually dying. This is a death experience. I have friends who call it a temporary death experience, which is pretty good terminology. It's pretty good. I always thought of it as just I died.
Well, you did. It was a death experience.
I died. And I have someone else call it a near heaven experience or an in heaven experience. I tend to think of it myself as a form of mystical experience. Mm-hmm. The difference between a mystic like Meister Eckhart and myself is that Meister Eckhart was still connected to his body. He didn't die. Now, Julian in Norwich, maybe she did have a near-death experience. I've read recently, but I haven't read enough of that to know whether she did or she didn't. But I've had mystical experiences, other ones, and I'm always attached to my body. But when you die, there's no attachment. It's severed. There's a severing that happens.
And that, to me, makes it very interesting because in order to be back, there has to be a reattachment.
Yes.
So
that's what happened to me.
Did it feel like you were stitched back together? You were just force-fed back into your form, or
more painful than that? It was not. So skipping ahead to, I asked to come back. And for the sake of my parents, we could talk about that after. But so I got sent back in an instant. And in that instant, I had to make a choice about what life I would live. I had to make a decision on what kind of life I wanted to live, close to the light, far away from the light, or anywhere in between those two things. And I chose. And then as I went down this tunnel, I became smaller and smaller and smaller. I got crushed. It was like I was a very large 18-wheeler getting shoved into a compactor that ended up about a centimeter cubed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was awful. And I felt like I was being screwed into my body. Like I was ice screws. And you ice climb, you use these very long ice screws. And I felt like I was being screwed slowly into my body, and it just was all pain. I had forgotten pain. I had forgotten suffering. Suffering did not exist in heaven. There was no suffering. And it's not like, okay, today I'm not suffering, and tomorrow I'm going to stub my toe. There was no toe to stub. There was just no pain, no suffering. And now my experience of being crushed down to fit inside this tiny little physical body it was just pain. It was suffering. My first experience of being back in the world again inside my body was just pure suffering, pain. As I came to in my body, everything hurt. My hands hurt, my feet hurt, my whole body was in pain. It was awful. And I was confused.
Right.
What is this?
It had to be just obviously it was not unbearable because here you are.
Oh, it's not unbearable.
But it had to be so disconcerting to be going from, I'm here with the Creator, we're wrecking this out. Oh, I have to go and fix things, but, thanks so much. And coming back was not nearly as smooth as going out.
No. And I regretted it immediately.
Why do you think that is? What do you think that coming back, when you're coming back with things happening that you are trying to adjust, is harder than being taken out, even when, you're leaving your body and you're going on to the beyond, and that's a relative piece of cake next to coming back? Why do you think that is?
Well, because one is leaving suffering and the other one's returning to it. One's going into bliss and peace, and the other one's going back to a hell.
Well, realistically.
And I went back. Okay, so I had such a divine. We didn't describe to the audience yet why I chose to come back, and so I'll talk a little bit about that. I went through this hell experience. I was then infilled with a abundance of love, and I expanded in size. So I grew in size, but it wasn't just love. It was all these goodness, beauty, joy, adoration, bliss, paradise, understanding, knowledge, awe, and more, unlimitedness. I just was infilled with this oneness of being that was revealed to me. And I knew that I was beloved, that I'd always been beloved. I was always the special child of God. That's what it felt like to me. And when this experience was happening, I said to God, the divine, without language, I said, my parents are suffering. My sister had vanished when I was 14. She had run away, broke my family. It's a long, terrible saga that lasted decades with lots of tragedies and just lots of things happened. But my mom had this long period of mourning for my sister that ended in a breakdown, and I couldn't bear the thought of them continuing to suffer. And I said, I can't count yet. I haven't gone all the way into the divine, into heaven yet. Do I have to go? And in that second, in that thought, in that expression, I was swept across heaven to the edge of heaven where the universe is created. I came to the interface of heaven and the universe, this universe, and sort of like my vision was popped outside of heaven while the whole of me was still in heaven, and I could see all of the universe. I could see all of the galaxies, and my vision was then I was steered to one galaxy, down to one solar system, down to Earth, and I could see all of Earth all at once. And I could see every single human being living then in that moment, doing what they all were doing. 7 billion people all at once. I could see them in their actions, loving, making love. There was murder, there was war, there was beauty, there was art, there was commerce. There's everything that goes on Earth in this one moment. I could see all of it, and I could see inside of every single person a divine fleck of golden love. Like a speck of gold dust inside of every single person. But the whole Earth was covered with this very thick, dense foam through which everybody moved with ease, but blinded everyone to the light inside everyone else. And the voice said to me, and revealed, it's like I say it said to me, but really it was this experience, this overwhelming experience of all of the love. Imagine in a moment all of the galaxies and all of the universe, and all of the star systems, and all of the atoms, and all of the protons, and all of the neutrons, and all of the energy, and all of that is love. And it's 1 billion times bigger than that. And the voice says to me, in the way that I love you now, I have always loved you, was, is, and always will be. And because of my love, all is well for everyone, because you can see the divine speck of light inside of every person. is well, was well, and will be well. All will be well for everyone. And I could see my parents' faces in particular, and I could see the suffering that they were going to endure in life without me, and I could see the suffering that they would not endure in life if I went back. And so I was presented with this information, and I chose to go back, to come back, to save my parents from this additional suffering of a loss of a second child.
Okay, I'm going to interject here.
Okay.
Because it's break time. I'm so sorry. But we will be right back. Don't miss a second. We will be right back.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting. The best in paranormal talk radio.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope.
That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
This is Jason Bland, host of Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup, where we stream live as a webcast every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, with guests who will blow your mind. Live ghost box sessions where you can call into the show to see if the spirits will talk to you, and the World Wide Web of Weird with the latest in paranormal news and evidence. We're bringing the weird every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow and subscribe.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama. Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back. I am so glad you're here with me on Fate Mag Radio and with my guest, Peter. And Peter, I am so sorry that I had to interrupt you. Peter Panagore, I'm so sorry I had to interrupt you because I feel like I'm doing that to you left, right, and in between. So you have so much to impart. But we were talking about your coming back and about why you chose to do that. And I think it sounds noble.
Well, thanks for that. But I was in a state of bliss, and I knew that I was an eternal soul. And so, what's a couple of minutes more on Earth?
Right.
The length of my life was the wink of my eye. That's the way it felt to me. It was nothing. And so the divine said to me when the faces of my parents I could see them, the divine said to me, they'll be here in a minute. Their life will be over. But I could see that was true, but I could also see that not for them it wouldn't be a minute.
Right.
For them it would be 90 years or, whatever it was left, 70 years. I can't remember how old they were. My dad's 91 now. And in the process of beginning his dying process. So
I'm sorry, that's difficult.
Thank you. Thank you. So when I made the choice to come back, I asked, do I have to stay? I haven't gone all the way yet. Can I go back? And the divine said to me, yes, you can go back. Because, and I felt like I could go back because it would only be in a minute. I could endure that. So, and then I'll be back here to bliss, where I know I'm beloved, where I know all is well, where I know every single human being is the prodigal child, to throw a little Christian in there. Everyone is beloved. No one is unloved. Everyone belongs. And so I asked if I could come back, and the divine said, yes, but it's time for you to stay. You're welcome to stay here. I said, well, if I can go back and come back here, can I do that? And the voice said, yes. And I said, well, then I choose to live my life. And the divine said, you won't live your life, and sent me back. And I haven't lived my life. I came back an alien. I came back a very different person. I'm not the person I was before. And my whole future changed. I made all sorts of other decisions based in this. My graduate school, my career, my marriage, I have kids. My kids wouldn't have been born. The timeline of my family life changed because I asked to come back. The timeline of my life changed.
That's an interesting statement or description.
And I know this every moment of my life, and nobody else seems to know. It's this weird thing. When I came back, the divine told me I would not live my life because I am not the same person. I came back with this extraordinary knowledge of who and I only came back with a drop of the knowledge I had on the other side. I had an ocean of knowledge on the other side, but on this side, my brain is too small. But there's all this residual inside of me, and it makes me perceive the world in a very different way. I see myself. When I look at myself, I'm looking at my hands right now in front of my face. I'm looking at my hands, and I know they're not me. I know I live inside what's basically a rental unit. And
That's a brilliant statement.
Well, thank you.
Description.
And I'm, my lease is going to run out one day.
Yeah.
And then I get to go home again. But in the meanwhile, I live inside this thing. It's like living inside a biological robot. I know I inhabit my body. I hear my voice. You hear my voice. I know that's not me. I think my thoughts. I know they're not mine. I know they belong to this thing in which I live. And my biggest problem in my life had been, especially for the first few decades, was integrating my higher self and my physical self, and also regretting that I had come back. I was pissed off.
Really?
Oh my God, I was angry for 2 decades. That I was like, you, I was like screaming at God in my head. You didn't tell me this was going to be what it's like. You told me I wasn't going to live my life, but you didn't tell me what it meant. And then I realized only in the last decade that it was a kindly meant warning.
It was.
Yep. But when I came back, I was like, oh my, what did you do to me? But I did it to myself.
Yeah.
It took a long time for me to work all this stuff through. And I did it on my own. And it wasn't until, 2017 that I even knew that there were other people like me. No, that's not true. In 2003, 2002, something like that, I told my church, I was a minister. Okay, let me talk about that for a minute. I am not a person of faith. Okay, we talked about this in the
We did.
We did. I am not. I don't have any faith. I don't have any belief. I don't believe in anything. I don't believe in politics. I have opinions. I live in the real world. I make decisions. But everything that human society and culture and language, it's all made up. All of it is artificial. None of it is true. All of it is passing away. All of it's impermanent. And so I came back. I had experienced God as above all religion. God has no religion. God has no gender. God has no substance of thingness that can possibly be described. But love is just a word that I use to describe the infinite that I can't tell you what it is. But
I understand that.
But I got ordained. I went to, instead of going to graduate school in architecture, like to join the family firm, the architectural firm of my family, that I've been working toward my whole life from the day I was a child, pushing a pencil, and then through college working in construction, and everything changed. I went to divinity school to study mysticism. I went to Yale to study. They don't even teach it there. I had to take classes across the university and do an independent study for 3 years, which I did in order to find language to think about what had happened to me. And then I got talked into being a minister by the dean of students, and then I got ordained. And then in 2000, 2 or 3 after this big embezzlement in the church that I was leading, someone said to me one day after this whole thing, it was awful. We made the front page of the statewide news when it all finally broke. But I got so mistreated over all these years as we were trying to figure out what the money problems were. It turns out that the treasurer was stealing all the money. And
that would be a problem.
It would be a problem. And then finally, one of the deacons came up to me this Sunday morning after all of this was done and the court case was done and how they had treated me really poorly. The whole church had for a long period of time. They apologized to me, and the deacon said to me, "You must have had a lot of faith to put up with what we did to you." And I thought to myself, today's the day I'm going to tell him I have no faith at all. And I stood up in the pulpit, and I for the first time in my life, I told my story publicly. I told it a couple times here and there, but not much. And I told them that I'm not a person of faith, and the reason I was able to do what I did for them is because I know where I'm from. I know to whom I belong, and I know where I'm going. My confidence in who I am has influenced every single decision in my life. That's why before I was talking about, near-death experience versus death experience. The reason why I was held at gunpoint and all these crazy things is because I know who I am and where I'm from. Because I've gone into these situations for the sake of other people, to protect other people, to help other people.
You're a warrior.
I'm a warrior. I am a warrior. I am. And it's very freeing to know who you are and where you're from.
It is.
It is. And to know that it's love, and to know that all's well, and to lean my life not in decision making based on monetary or worldly gain, but make my decision making based in my eternal soul, because I'm only temporarily here. I know that. I know that this is just one of the lives that I had lived, and not one of these lives I had lived has ever been me. I've always been soul, and I focused my life on that. And my eternal nature matters more to me. Love matters more to me, because love is this treasure that it's the only thing you get to bring with you. It's it.
Well, it obviously is, because love for your parents is what brought you back.
Yep, and I should, if you didn't know, I died a second time in 2015 of a heart attack, a family genetic thing.
I didn't know.
No, I died of they call it a widowmaker heart attack.
Oh, yes.
I live in a rural place. I live an hour and a half away from the catheterization lab. And by the time I got to the cath lab, which I did get to, I died on the way, but it was 2.5 hours at least. So I had a ton of damage. But I died in the ambulance on the way, and I had a choice. And I chose to come back this time for my granddaughter who had just been born. My daughter had just left a very bad relationship, putting it mildly. And who was going to protect her? My daughter or my granddaughter? It had to be me. And who was going to be the male influence in this beautiful child's life? It had to be me. And so I chose to come back again a second time. And so here I am. And now she's 6 and she's the star of my life and I'm the star of her life. And it was a good decision to come back for her. I know where I'm from. I know where I'm going. I can put off my desire to go home. I prayed every day. I live a meditative life. I practice Kriya Yoga and I practice centering prayer. I have for 40 years. They connect me to the divine. But also every single day I prayed to go home again. Take me home, God. I want to die. Let me die. I'm tired of this place every day until 2015 when I chose to come back for my granddaughter, at which point I committed to stay here as long as I can because I know there's going to be an end date. My body's going to wear out. But by then she'll be pretty well set up. She'll be old enough and strong enough that she'll miss me and I'll miss her. Well, I don't know if I'll miss her because she will still be present to me in love. Love is this love thing transcends death. It's easier from the other side than it is from this side. But it was a good choice.
I'm going to share with you that I lost a nephew.
I'm sorry.
And he was a beautiful child. I wasn't very involved in his life by his mother's choice. She is a different kind of human, and that's okay. Everybody makes their life. Mm-hmm. And so it was interesting to me that one of his teachers said that he came back to visit her. And he left a message that said, "Start living, love is real." And that was bracelets and keychains that his friends put together and shared. And that is when I realized that the love transcends. And that message coming back from a 17-year-old was not from a 17-year-old.
No.
So I just thought, well, I know where he is. He's in his infinity. So it was very difficult. My sister had a very difficult life, and he was her touchstone. So it was very difficult. But, it's just one of those things that he didn't really have a choice. His injury was immediate death. So it always makes me wonder with those who are taken in such a definitive way, why some are given the choice to come back and others obviously cannot. So that's what I ponder sometimes. Do you have anything relevant to that topic
I a couple
to share?
Things. I do. I was at the International Association for Near-Death Studies at their annual conference where I was a speaker again this year, but I was also a moderator, and I hosted Dr. Marjorie Woolacott's research talk. And her talk this year was on a study that she conducted with some other people in which they determined that 45% of those surveyed, in the hundreds, 300 plus people were surveyed, 45% of them had an after-death communication with somebody they loved. 45% of the population have a visitation from the dead. That's a huge number.
It is.
It in my life experience, it's not always the deceased doesn't always come back to the one you expected to come back. Didn't come back. Your nephew didn't come back to the mother. It came back to the teacher, and that often happens. But always the message is love of some form, forgiveness or or well-being with some form of love is communicated. And you're right, it's not a 17-year-old's message, because the 17-year-old body's gone. He never was a 17-year-old. He was always his soul. And why do some people get choice and some people not? I don't know. There are few of us who get a choice. I got a choice twice. I don't know why me. I don't know.
Fortunate soul.
Yeah, I guess. I don't think of it that way. I think of it as the job that I'm doing for the sake of others. And everybody goes. There's a point at which nobody can come back. There's going to be a day I'm not going to come back as Peter again. The body's going to wear out. But the question is, why do some people get sent back? The grieving heart wants to know why you got to come back and my son didn't get to come back. I don't know. I just know that everybody. It's
an interesting paradox.
It is.
Everybody has what?
Everybody's gonna go. Nobody.
I had interrupted you.
That's right, Jim. As Jim Morrison from The Doors once said, "Nobody gets out of here alive."
That's right. A brilliant man, that Jim Morrison.
He was.
So, it's an interesting concept that had actually stuck in my craw a little bit. With all that I know and all that I've studied, I was still kind of like, that was such a definitive death moment.
Yep.
And from someone who had lost, that affected directly someone who had lost so much and had such a terrible life. And I had to really struggle. And she doesn't know that I really contemplated that was something that seemed very harsh to me. That it just seemed odd with what I knew of the love and the love and the concern that the Creator has for all of us. And when I said something to her at one point, or somebody said something to her at one point about God, and she said, "Oh yeah, I believe in God. He scares the hell out of me." And I thought, oh, that's awful, because so much had been taken from her.
Yep.
And she didn't want to cross him again. And maybe, I don't know what else could possibly have damaged her to lose after that. But, it was just such an interesting concept. Do you ever have, well, we're going to have to take a break, but what I would like to talk about when we come back is, do you have any insight from the two experiences that you had with anyone being singled out or anything? Because in that love, something created a fear of it in this individual. So I would like to touch just a second on that when we come back, if that's okay.
I think we're talking about grief, but yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, we are going to go so we can come back and cover that. And if you are listening and waiting on a chance to get your questions in chat, this is the time. We are going into our final segment, so y'all come back and join us.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope.
That'll do. Hello, I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio for our final segment this evening, and I have to tell you that Peter Panagore has been an astounding guest. I'm honored that you have been here. I think that there's a great resonance in this conversation. So, genuinely, thank you.
And genuinely, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I've asked you a question that was kind of a strange paradox, I think. But would you like to expand on that, or do you have any?
Go ahead.
I do want to say, for those of you who are listening, that I was not aware that Peter has a counseling service through Zoom. It's a global ministry outreach, I guess, for the counseling. And I was unaware of that when I asked him that question, relevant to how these kind of things, the juxtaposition of faith to loss to fear of the divine can happen. So I did kind of throw a whammy on you there for your last segment.
Oh no, that's fine. It's fine. I think, to answer your question, I think people misunderstand God. I think that they think that God has puppetry strings and making things happen. Taking the life of a young person. God must. I've been to lots of funerals. I was a minister. Been a lot of funerals, a lot of young people, and I would often hear and cringe. The person standing in line with the grieving mother, holding the mother's hand, saying, "God only takes the good ones. God only takes the good ones." Like, what are you talking about? You're not helping.
That is not.
Shut your trap. You're hurting.
Just move on down to the buffet line.
Right, exactly. It doesn't work that way. It's not like everybody dies. And sometimes your ticket's up when you're 16. And sometimes it's when you're 66. And sometimes it's cancer, and sometimes it's a car wreck, or sometimes it's a decision that you made that was a bad one.
Yes.
And it's nature. The nature of nature is death. It's also rebirth and life, but it's also death. And people look at God as like Santa Claus. They pray to God They pray to God for things. Oh God, it's like that Janis Joplin song. Now I'm showing my age. Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes Benz? It's like, well, that's what people pray for. Can I have this? Can I have that? Like it's a piggy bank. But that's not the way it works. It's not about things, because all of these things here are impermanent. It's about the divine self. If you aim yourself, as Jesus said, you aim at heaven above all things.
Yes.
And then all things were added unto you. But it's not the things of the world that are given to you. It's gifts of wisdom and courage and understanding and knowledge and strength and resiliency. And so when people believe in God, a God of giving, the giver of good gifts, when the best gift of your life is taken from you, then all you can do is, in the midst of your grief, is blame the one who only gives good gifts. Well, you didn't give me a good gift this time. And grief hurts so deeply that it can turn even the greatest person of faith into a hater of God.
I think we've all seen that to a degree in our lives.
Yeah. Yep. And I do run a counseling service, and I do deal with grieving people. Primarily, I deal with people who have had mystical experiences, spiritually transformative experiences that they don't know who else to talk to. They can't talk to anybody about them. I talk to people like that. I talk to people who have lost people. My nephew, a year and a half ago, had the most horrendous suicide that I've ever read or heard or seen ever in my life. And there was no coming back from. And it was devastating. Even for someone like me who knows what's on the other side, loss is loss. When a person is removed from our life unexpectedly, it hurts a great deal. And unless you have some inner resources, some resiliency of a deeper, truer faith, it's hard to recover. Not impossible, but just hard.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
sad.
Thank you. Because she is somebody who has studied mysticism in varying forms. So it was very difficult to hear her anger and her pain. And
well, can I talk about that for a moment?
Yes, please.
The study of mysticism. So I've studied mysticism. I've spent my life studying it. That's what my graduate degree is in. I've studied it ever since. But not a single book that I opened increased my connection to the divine. Not a word that I read. Only by applying the practices that I read about.
Absolutely.
By living a life of contemplation, that's what gives me the strength, not the reading of it, not the knowing about it, but the practice of the pursuit of it. That's where the strength comes from. And so that's why illiterate people like this guy named Brother Lawrence from, I think it was 1600s, this illiterate footman who joined the monastery and ended up washing dishes for a living, never read a book in his life, why he became a mystical great person, because he practiced, not because he studied. It has nothing to do with language skills or intelligence or education. It has to do with walking the inward journey and loving other people in the process.
Yes.
That's where it is. And you don't have to be in a monastery to do it. You can do it in your living room. You can do it in your kitchen. You can do it wherever you are.
You can do it walking down the street, just being the person that you would like to meet.
Yes, exactly so. It's no great mystery how to access God. It's just love. But if you want to have a deeper spiritual life, if you of selflessness, then go inside and practice tools that lead you to silence the thoughts of your head and be in the now. And this is my practice, this is what I teach, this is what I've been doing for 40 years, learning to step into the silence And every time that I step into the silence, which is every day of my life, in my meditation, I touch into the silence. It creates a reservoir of that inside of me. And that reservoir of being in the isness and the now connects me to the divine self now and grows inside of me, turns me into a channel of peace, creates a bubble of radiance around me so that I'm always in the presence of heaven here and now. Not that it takes away my suffering, or ends or makes me make good decisions about, say, starting up the lawnmower without enough oil in the tank. I still do that kind of crazy stuff.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, or having too much oil in the tank is what I did this year. And so it doesn't change those sorts of things, but it does change my reaction to those sorts of things. It changes my presence in the world. It's a powerful thing. Go ahead.
It is a very powerful thing. I have a friend who recently was able to forgive someone who hurt her and then died. And she went inside herself. She went through meditation and prayer and was finally able to say, okay, you're forgiven. Now go away. Because it was the voice in it was the voice in her head. He was the voice in her head. And so she was able to alleviate that with forgiveness, but she had to fight for the forgiveness. And I really admire that because the anger is so much easier.
Yeah.
Right? You have to work for forgiveness
You
to be able to give it.
Yourself. Well, you free yourself in the process too.
Yep, she did. And I think that's really a cool thing, in my opinion.
Oh, I think so.
But now, I want to give you an opportunity to let people know where to find you, where to find your books, tell them about your books, and if you're still doing your 2 minutes for God.
Well, I am at peterpanagore.love, which is where you can book an appointment with me if you want to talk to me, and where you can see my YouTube channel. I run Not Church on Sunday mornings at 11 a.m., at 10 a.m. live Eastern time. And it is a no doctrine, no dogma, no, I have to say Bravo Sierra on YouTube because I can't swear. So no Bravo Sierra. And it is a deconstruction. I'm a deconstructionist and a decolonize. I help people decolonize their mind from bad theology. And I aim to uncover the divine light in the teachings of Jesus, but also I work a lot from Lao Tzu and Hafez and Kabir and the Yoga Sutras, and it's a pretty broad-based sort of thing. I teach meditation a couple days a week on YouTube too, and I run this counseling service. But so my book, 2 Minutes for God, is a daily devotional that came out of my 15 years on television, where I had a 2-minute spot reaching 30 million viewers a year, about 100,000 people a day, more or less, on 2 NBC stations in New England. And I had 2 minutes just before the morning weather to tell an original story of faith and inspiration and hope. And my first book was a main bestseller called 2 Minutes for God. That's that book. My second book is Heaven is Beautiful, How Dying Taught Me that Death is Just the Beginning. It's an international Audible bestseller, and it's available at Amazon. Both these books are at Amazon and Barnes & Nobles and other fine bookstores around the world, mostly in the English-speaking world, but also elsewhere. And I'm working on my third book, which has been set aside for a little while I work on the movie Heaven is Beautiful. My book was optioned by some major producers in Hollywood. I've been working with them for a year to massage this into a feature film. And so I've been working on that. I can't wait. Well, thanks.
I'm looking forward to that. It's been a lot of work
and a lot of writing work, I'll tell you. But thanks. It's going to be great. And I love working with these people. And one of these producers heard me on a broadcast, a podcast that I did, and she's a near-death experiencer. And that's how she heard me, and she's like, oh, my God, I got to talk to this guy. And that's how that all shook out.
And there you are.
PeterPanagore.love.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time, for your willingness to share all of these experiences, and for bringing such a great message. I have so much enjoyed this show. And you. So
It's been my pleasure.
Well, maybe we can do it again sometime. I would like that. And you can also follow Peter on Twitter. So it's at PB Panagore. PBPANAGORE.
True enough.
So thank you again. I look forward to being a frequent visitor on your YouTubes. And I love the non-church.
Yeah, thanks. It's
someone of faith that's teaching reality. That's wonderful.
That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do. Yep. It's an exploration. It's an adventure for me.
Well, sure it is. But you're sharing your journey. That's neat. I like that. So that being said, for all of our listeners, whether live or by the podcast, The Wonder of the Internet, thank you for joining us. You know, you're the reason we, every show on this network, you're the reason we put it together. So we appreciate you, everyone. And I will be back on Wednesday with Paranormal Experience with Kat Hobson, but then we will have the Full Spectrum Project with Peter, Brian, and the Weird World News with Angie. Then Friday will be, well, I think it's going to be a replay week, but Ghost Talk Radio with 187 PI with Shelley Burke Robertson. And then I'll join you again on Fate the following Sunday. Same cat time, same cat channel. Mm-hmm. I will talk to y'all then. Thank you again, Peter.
You're welcome, Kat. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. For everyone, you know, I'm not going to stop without saying this, but, you know, there's so much angst, there's so much fear, there's so much turmoil, there's so little supply in the stores. We're being told that Christmas may be canceled, which is just the epitome of striking the fear into the heart of parents around the world, as well as the children. But, you know, you don't have to buy into that. It's not what we're about. You can be the change that you see in the world, that you want to see in the world, that you feel that the world deserves. Every time you go out or stay in, you can just be the friend that you would like to have, the spouse that you would love to have, the child that you would like to have. Live in a world that you create and manifest that you would like to have. We have that power. It's within us. Go out there and be you and change the world. Talk to you later. Good night, and thank you so much for joining me here on Fate Magazine Radio. Good night.